I died on a Wednesday. The soup tasted wrong. I remember that now. A faint bitterness under the mushroom broth. I thought it was the cheap stock powder Cassandra always bought. I thought wrong. The ceiling of my bedroom tilted. My fingers went numb one by one. I tried to call out, but my throat had already closed. The last thing I heard was her heels on the hardwood click. Click. Click, moving away from my door. Not toward it. There was one question I never got to ask her. But I'll get to that later. I woke up gasping. The air hit me like cold water, clean, sharp, real. I was 8 years old again. I was lying on grandfather's old sofa. The wool scratched against my cheek. The lamp in the corner buzzed its familiar, half-broken hum. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked twice, then went quiet. I knew exactly what had happened. I knew exactly where I was. I knew exactly what was coming. My hands were small again. Soft. Useless. I sat up slowly. I pressed my palms flat against my knees. I breathed through my nose until my heartbeat dropped below panic. It took 11 breaths. I counted every one. I had 31 years to redo, and I was not going to waste a single day of them. The smell of the house hit me before the memories did. Old wood. Mothballs. The faint ghost of my grandfather's pipe tobacco, cherry, and cedar. He had quit smoking 6 years before this moment. But the smell had soaked into the walls like a confession. I had forgotten how much I loved that smell. In my other life, I never came back here after the funeral. Cassandra made sure of that. Cassandra. My cousin. My blood. The woman who smiled at my eulogy with dry eyes. She was 11 years old right now. 4 rooms away. Probably already awake, already calculating something. She had always been an early riser. Even at 11. She had the eyes of an accountant and the smile of a salesperson. I used to think that was charming. Now I knew what it really meant. I did not panic. Panic was for people who did not know what was coming. I stood up on my child legs. I walked to the window. The yard was brown and overgrown. Grandfather always kept it that way. He believed trimmed hedges were for people with nothing important to do. The oak tree stood at the far end. Its roots had cracked the concrete path in 3 places. I had played under that tree every summer for 6 years. Under those roots, 31 years from now, they would find the original deed documents. The ones Cassandra had told everyone were destroyed in a fire. I filed that away. I had a plan. I could not execute it yet. I was 8 years old with no money, no credentials, no leverage. But I had something better. I had memory. I knew every mistake I had made the first time. I knew every lie she had told before she told it. I knew every person who would betray me, and every person who would not. That was not nothing. That was everything. Grandfather called us down for breakfast. His voice was still strong then. This was 3 years before the diagnosis. I descended the stairs carefully, holding the banister. My legs were unsteady. Not from illness. From the strangeness of inhabiting a body that did not remember what my mind did. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and black coffee. Grandfather stood at the stove in his undershirt, frowning at the eggs. He never did learn to cook them without burning the edges. I felt something crack open in my chest, grief, stupid and sudden. He had been dead for 23 years in my other life. And here he was, cursing at a pan. I sat down and said nothing. Cassandra came in 2 minutes later. She was already dressed, a little pink blouse, her dark hair combed and braided. Perfect, as always. She kissed grandfather on the cheek and helped set the table without being asked. She caught my eye across the kitchen and smiled. I smiled back. I had practiced the smile before I came downstairs. You look pale, she said. Bad dream, I said. She tilted her head. Her eyes were brown and very clear. About what? Nothing that matters, I said. That was a lie. Everything mattered now. I had learned that the hard way, the hardest way possible. We ate. Grandfather talked about the property tax notices he had received. Even then. Even in this early memory, the land was already becoming a problem. 300 acres outside the city. Worth something in theory. In practice, it was tied up in debts grandfather did not fully understand. Legal complications his first lawyer had never properly resolved. In my first life, I had tried to untangle it after his death. I had spent 4 years and most of my savings on lawyers and surveyors and title searches. And then Cassandra had produced a document. A handwritten addendum to the will. Dated 2 weeks before grandfather died. It signed everything over to her. I had contested it. Of course I had. The handwriting experts said it was genuine. The witnesses said it was genuine. I had walked away with nothing but legal fees and a certainty I could never prove. That certainty had eaten me alive for the rest of my first life. And now I and more why I had been right. The addendum was a forgery. I had figured that out eventually too late, in my other life. Here, I had time to prepare the proof before it was even created. But I did not move yet. Moving too soon would alert her. Alert her and she would adapt. Cassandra was a brilliant woman. Give her a warning and she would vanish every trace. I needed her to believe completely, absolutely that I was the same naive Alara she had always known. So I smiled. I helped clear the table. I asked grandfather about the oak tree. He told me, for what he thought was the first time, about how his own grandfather had planted it. I listened as if I had never heard the story, as if the sound of his voice was not the only thing keeping me from shaking apart. The summer passed. Then the years. I was not passive. I only appeared to be. I paid attention in school in a way I never had the first time. I took notes not just on coursework, but on people. Who told the truth under pressure? Who smiled when they should have been concerned? Who kept secrets and who leaked them? I built a map of everyone around me, teachers, neighbors, family, friends. I cataloged who could be trusted and who was performing trust. Cassandra, I watched most carefully of all. She was gifted, genuinely. Top of her class. Charming in a way that made adults adore her and peers compete for her attention. She collected favors the way some girls collected stickers. She was never cruel in a way you could point to. She was always the one helping. Always the one smoothing things over. Always the one who said the kind thing at the exact right moment. She was also, I now knew, the most calculating person I had ever met. I watched her work. I noted her methods. And I began, very quietly, to make myself small. In my first life, I had been ambitious. I had pushed to be involved in everything: family finances, property decisions, the management of grandfather's affairs as he aged. Cassandra had resented it. She had worked against me precisely because I was competition. This time, I stepped back. I let her take the lead. I shrugged when family asked my opinion. I deferred to her judgment in front of grandfather. I played the distracted, gentle cousin who was good at numbers but not particularly interested in money. I was not good at numbers. I was exceptional at numbers. And I was very, very interested in money specifically. In who was stealing it and how. Grandfather's health began to decline when I was 19. I was studying accounting at the city college. Unremarkable grades deliberately. Cassandra was at a prestigious university on a scholarship she had worked hard to earn. Everyone assumed she would handle the estate when the time came. That was exactly what I wanted them to assume. I did not stop working. I only stopped working visibly. I found a lawyer named Mr. Renard. He was 53, semi-retired, and had a reputation for being aggressively uninteresting. His office smelled of old leather and cold radiator metal. His carpet was brown. His diplomas were crooked on the wall. He made no impression whatsoever, which was why everyone had always overlooked him. He also happened to be the foremost document fraud specialist in the region. In my first life, I had found him 4 years too late. I found him now. I told him nothing about the future. I told him I had reason to believe someone might attempt to forge a testamentary document involving my grandfather's estate. I told him I wanted to be prepared. He looked at me over his reading glasses for a long time. Then, he said, "What kind of preparation did you have in mind?" "I need to understand exactly what a forgery looks like," I said. and exactly how to prove it. He was quiet. The clock on his wall ticked. The fluorescent light hummed. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. "All right," he said. "Let's talk." That was the first move. One phone call. One afternoon in a brown-carpeted office. It would matter enormously later. But right now, it looked like nothing. Good. Grandfather declined over 18 months. I was home every weekend. Cassandra visited when she could, which became less and less often as her career accelerated. The family noticed. Some of them mentioned it gently, carefully, the way families mention things they do not want to become arguments. Cassandra always had an explanation. A conference. A deadline. An unavoidable obligation. The explanations were credible. They were also, I suspected, precisely calibrated. She was letting me do the labor of caring for him. She was letting me build the emotional credit with the family. In my first life, I had thought that was unfair. I had been hurt by it. I had said things at Christmas that I later regretted. This time, I said nothing. I made the drives. I cooked the meals. I sat with grandfather through the bad nights when his mind slipped sideways and he called me by my mother's name. I did not resent it. Or rather, I chose not to resent it. Resentment was expensive. I needed my energy for other things. I was also, during those 18 months, building something Cassandra did not know about. Grandfather had a storage unit in town, old family records going back 4 decades. He had mentioned it once, years ago in my first life, and I had never followed up. This time, I went. The unit smelled of must and slow decay. The fluorescent tube inside flickered. Cardboard boxes were stacked to the ceiling, tax returns, correspondence, property records, contractor invoices going back to the 1980s. I went through every box. I photographed every document that seemed relevant. I found 3 things that mattered. First, a surveyor's report from 1994. It documented soil contamination testing on the eastern parcel, the most valuable section of the property. The results were marked inconclusive. But attached, in a separate folder, was a private lab analysis that was not inconclusive at all. Hexavalent chromium. Levels well above the remediation threshold. The remediation cost estimate was attached. It was ruinous. Someone had known. Someone had buried it. And whoever eventually inherited that eastern parcel would inherit the liability along with the land. Second, a letter. Handwritten. From a man named Torrio. I knew that name. In my first life, Cassandra had sold the eastern parcel to a development company. 14 months after grandfather died. The most valuable section gone. Within a year, the development company had gone bankrupt and its principals had been arrested for financial fraud. Cassandra had claimed she was an innocent seller who had no knowledge of their activities. The letter was dated 1997. Torrio had been a business associate of those same principals for decades. He had known grandfather. And the letter discussed, in careful, oblique language, an arrangement regarding the eastern parcel that should not appear in any formal documentation. Third, a copy of the actual, original will. Dated correctly. Witnessed by 2 people whose signatures I recognized. In it, the estate was divided equally between Cassandra and me. I photographed everything. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel. I had already made arrangements for the photographs. Mr. Renard had given me the name of a document archive service that specialized in legal preservation. Every image went there that night, time-stamped and certified. The envelope in my coat pocket felt warm against my ribs. Cassandra would find out what was inside it eventually. But not until I decided she should. 3 weeks later, grandfather died. It was a Tuesday. Early morning, just before dawn. I was there. Cassandra was not. The house filled with relatives by noon. The smell of coffee and cut flowers and collective grief. I moved through it quietly, accepting condolences, making tea. Cassandra arrived at 3 in the afternoon. She was wearing black, perfectly chosen, perfectly fitted. Her eyes were red. I could not tell if she had been crying or if she had simply applied something around them. She embraced me. She smelled of rosewater and something underneath it, sandalwood, faint and warm. I recognized the smell immediately. It was the same perfume she had worn the day they read my other life's will, the day she had won. My stomach did not turn. I had prepared for this moment. But my hands went cold for just a second. 1 second. Then I breathed, and they were warm again. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here," she said. "It's all right," I said. He wasn't alone. She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes moved across my face, reading it. She was very good at reading faces. I kept mine still and a little sad, the face of a grieving woman, unremarkable, a little worn. "He would have wanted you here," I said. "But he understood." She nodded. She believed me. I could see it. She had no idea I was watching. The estate lawyer read the will 4 days later. His office had that specific institutional smell. Printer toner. Rubber bands. The faint ghost of someone's takeout from an hour earlier. The chairs were uncomfortable. Fluorescent lighting, the kind that makes everyone look slightly ill. Cassandra sat to my left. She was very still. She had prepared herself, I could tell. She knew what was coming, or she thought she did. The lawyer read. He described the property. He described the liquid assets. He began to read the division. And then he paused. "There is," he said, "an addendum." He produced it. A second document, handwritten on grandfather's personal stationery, dated 11 days before the death. I had known this was coming. I had prepared Mr. Renard for this moment 6 months in advance. I had given him everything he needed. The original will. The storage unit documents. The forensic markers of grandfather's handwriting at the late stage of his illness. The tremor. The pen pressure. The tremor. The letter formation. The specific pen pressure. We had been over it in detail. The fluorescent light in Mr. Renard's office. The scratch of his pen on a legal pad. The smell of old leather and cold radiator metal. He had said, "When this document appears, have the estate lawyer pause the reading. Request a 30-day review period. You have grounds you're a named beneficiary. They cannot refuse." The estate lawyer, to his credit, agreed. Cassandra objected. Her voice was careful and controlled. She cited grandfather's wish for a swift resolution. She suggested that delaying the process would only prolong the family's grief. "I'm sure you understand," I said quietly, "that I'd simply like to be certain everything is in order." She looked at me. Something moved behind her eyes, not quite worry. "Calculation." "Of course," she said. Her voice was smooth. Her smile was warm. "Of course, Alara." That was when I knew she did not suspect me at all. She still saw the old Alara. The soft one. The one who cried at commercials and trusted too easily and never checked the fine print. Good. I needed her to keep seeing that Alara for a little while longer. The 30-day review began. I did not waste a single hour of it. Mr. Renard retained a forensic handwriting specialist, a woman named Dr. Park, worked out of a lab. It smelled of chemicals and burnt coffee. The place had the aggressive neatness of someone who tolerated no uncertainty whatsoever. She was 41 years old and had testified in 47 fraud cases. She examined the addendum against every authentic document of grandfather's I could provide. She called me at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. Her voice was flat and precise. "The document was not written by your grandfather," she said. "The letter formation in the final section is inconsistent with documented tremor progression. The ink layering indicates the date was added after the body text. I can prove both in court." I wrote down everything she said. My handwriting was very neat. It had been neat since I was 9 years old. I had practiced it specifically for moments like this. "Thank you," I said. I did not celebrate. Celebration was for later. There was still a great deal of work to do. I made 3 more calls that night. One to Mr. Renard, who said nothing but wrote everything down. One to a financial investigator named Holt. A contact from work had referred him. He specialized in estate fraud and did not ask unnecessary questions. and one to an environmental attorney who had written a paper on chromium contamination liability in 2003 that I had found during my storage unit research. By midnight, I had a team. None of them knew about each other yet. That was intentional. I also transferred $11,000 from my personal savings into a retainer account. It was most of what I had. I did not hesitate. Cassandra, I knew, was not idle. She had her own lawyer, a firm she had hired with money I suspected came from the advance she had already been taking against grandfather's estate. She was also, I was nearly certain, preparing a secondary set of documents in case the addendum was challenged. She was thorough. She always had been. What she was not was prepared for someone who had already read the ending. The days moved differently once I had a target. I had a small apartment, then 2 rooms and a kitchen above a dry cleaner. The chemical smell from the shop below came up through the floorboards every morning. Sharp and clean and slightly wrong. I had lived there 6 months. I had chosen it deliberately. Cheap, anonymous, nowhere Cassandra would visit. I had also chosen the landlord deliberately. He was an old man named Felix who accepted cash and forgot faces. He had the patience of someone who had stopped expecting anything interesting to happen. He was exactly what I needed. In the evenings, I spread my documentation across the kitchen table. The soil report. The Torio letter. The financial records I had been assembling. The copies of every statement from grandfather's accounts going back 5 years. I organized them by date, then by subject, then by the order in which I intended to use them. I had a plan. I always had a plan. I just never showed anyone the full shape of it. The man named Holt had been finding things. He was methodical. He did not speak unless he had something precise to say. His reports arrived by encrypted email in plain language, no speculation, only documented fact. His office, the one time I visited, smelled of sharp pencils and stale air. The faint chemical ghost of a printer working overtime hung near the ceiling. His first report contained 11 pages. I read every line twice. Cassandra had been moving carefully. She was not reckless. She had spread the withdrawals across 3 different estate sub-accounts, timing them to align with legitimate expense categories. Catering invoice. Legal consultation. Property survey. Each entry was real enough that it would survive a casual review. Only a careful, motivated examination would show that the survey never happened and the legal consultation was billed twice. She had also, Holt had found, transferred funds from a dormant family trust account, one that technically required both our signatures. She had provided mine through a scanned authorization that I had signed 4 years ago for a different purpose entirely. The signature was mine. The context was not. I filed that away with everything else. Not yet. Not until it was useful. Meanwhile, Cassandra's public life continued to flourish. She posted on professional networks. She attended industry events. She gave a brief interview to a business publication about estate management and legacy planning, and I read it with the specific, quiet attention of someone collecting evidence, not performing outrage. She looked well. She looked confident. She looked like a woman who believed she had already won. Good. I wanted her comfortable. I wanted her to keep making the small, incremental moves that seemed safe to her. Each one added to the pattern. And patterns, once documented, were very hard to deny. I visited grandfather's property one afternoon. Alone. On a weekday. The gate was padlocked. Cassandra had arranged that. I walked the fence line instead. October had turned the fields brown and flat. The sky was a low, even gray. The smell of the land was specific and strange. Wet clay, dead grass, and underneath it something faintly chemical, the signature of what the soil held. The eastern parcel looked, to an untrained eye, like any other field. A little scrubby. A little flat. Some old infrastructure, a concrete foundation, some buried pipe. Nothing alarming. But I knew what was under the surface. And now, so would the regulatory agency. I had submitted the environmental report 3 days earlier. Anonymously. Through the appropriate channels, as a concerned citizen who had come across relevant documentation. Mr. Renard had advised me on the exact wording of the submission. He had also noted with his customary lack of expression that anonymous tips to environmental agencies go public quickly, especially when the land has an estate dispute attached. How quickly? I had asked. When the land has a pending estate dispute attached to it, he said, the incentive to act increases significantly. The clock was ticking. Not just for Cassandra, for the whole situation. The probate review had a deadline. The environmental assessment had a timeline. And Cassandra, I knew from my first life, became most dangerous when she felt time running out. She called me that weekend. Casual, warm, asking how I was managing. She mentioned grandfather. She mentioned the stress of the estate process. She floated very gently, almost incidentally, the idea of sitting down together to talk through the situation privately. Just family, she said. Before things get more complicated than they need to be. I'd like that, I said. But not this week. Things are a bit hectic. Of course, she said. Whenever you're ready. What she was doing. Gathering information. She wanted to know how much I knew and how prepared I was. She wanted to read my tone and gauge my vulnerability. She had done this in my first life, too, the same offer, the same warmth, the same invitation to be honest with her. In my first life, I had been honest. I had told her what I suspected and how scared I was. I had given her exactly what she needed to construct her next move. This time, I told her nothing useful. I was pleasant. I was slightly distracted. I thanked her for calling. I said goodbye first. 3 days later, she made her first significant error. She contacted the estate lawyer independently, without copying me, to inquire about the timeline for settling the liquid assets. The email was carefully worded. Appropriate. But it indicated that she was trying to accelerate the process before the probate review concluded. The estate lawyer, to his credit, forwarded the email to me. Professional protocol, he said. He wanted to ensure I was aware. I was aware. I was also aware of something he was not. The email was timestamped 9 days after Cassandra had received the environmental assessment request from the regulatory agency. She was trying to move money before the review locked things down. She was scared. And scared people made mistakes. I called Holt. I told him to expand his financial surveillance to include the liquid asset sub-accounts. She'll try to move something in the next 2 weeks, I said. I'll be watching. He said. He was right to be. 8 days later, a transfer request was submitted to the estate bank account. The request cited an outstanding legal invoice, a firm I had not previously encountered, for an amount significant enough to notice. I contacted the firm. I asked for a copy of the invoice for my records. The invoice did not exist. The firm had no record of any engagement with the estate. I sent this information to Mr. Renard. I also sent it to Holt. I asked Holt to document the transfer attempt through proper channels. The estate bank flagged the transfer 3 days later. It was suspended pending review. Cassandra received notification. I know because she called me that afternoon. Her voice, for the first time, had something in it that was not performing warmth. There seems to be a complication with the estate account, she said. I heard, I said. The bank is doing due diligence. It's probably nothing. Yes, she said. Probably. A pause. Longer than usual. I let it go on until she broke it. Are you handling things all right? She said. You sound tired. I'm fine, I said. Just working a lot. Of course, she said. Let me know if you need anything. I told her I would. I hung up. I sat for a moment in the quiet of my apartment. The dry cleaner smell rose through the floor. Outside, a bus stopped and started. A child yelled something brief and cheerful and ran on. There was one thing I had not told Holt yet. One piece I had been holding back. In my first life, Cassandra had one person she genuinely trusted, a man named Soren, her business partner of 12 years. Not romantically. Strategically. He was careful and methodical. He had the same essential quality Cassandra did. He believed that rules were frameworks that applied to other people. I had met Soren twice in my first life. He had been polite. Forgettable. I had forgotten him until it was too late. This time, I had found him early. I had identified his company. I had discovered, through Holt's research, that Soren's firm had received a consulting fee from Cassandra's holding company 1 month before grandfather's death. Soren was not a fool. He would not go down willingly with Cassandra if going down was inevitable. He was the kind of person who looked for exits. If I showed him the exit clearly enough, he would take it. I drafted a letter. Mr. Renard reviewed it. We sent it by certified mail to Soren's registered business address. The letter contained no accusations, only documented facts about the timeline and the financial trail. And one line at the end, written with care. We believe you may have received incomplete information from your client. If you wish to discuss this matter before formal proceedings begin, we would welcome that conversation. 3 days later, Soren's personal attorney called Mr. Renard's office. That was the sound of the structure beginning to give way. What happened next moved quickly. Soren's attorney wanted to know the scope of the investigation. Mr. Renard described it, precisely and without embellishment. The attorney asked for 48 hours. 31 hours later, Soren's attorney called again. His client was prepared to provide a statement. His client was also prepared to return the consulting fee and cooperate with any formal review. There would be documentation. A signed statement. Dates, figures, and the nature of Cassandra's arrangement with him. An arrangement he claimed he had not understood to be fraudulent. Whether that was true was not my problem. Whether that claim was true or not was not my problem. His cooperation was. I did not feel victorious. I felt the specific satisfaction of a mechanism working the way it was designed to work. Cassandra found out about Soren on a Thursday. I know because she showed up at my apartment building that evening. She did not buzz. She stood outside on the sidewalk and called my phone. I know you're home, she said. I can see your light. I looked down from the window. She was standing under the street lamp in a dark coat. Her hair was loose. The lamplight made her look very young and very tired simultaneously. I went downstairs. I let her into the lobby but not upstairs. We stood on the worn tile floor by the mailboxes. The building smelled of other people's cooking and mildew and old wood. She looked, for the first time, like what she actually was, someone who had built on a rotten foundation. And had just watched it begin to sink. The rose water smell was very faint tonight. Just a trace. The sandalwood was gone completely. Soren talked, she said. I know, I said. What did you offer him? Nothing, I said. I showed him the documentation. He made his own decisions. She pressed her lips together. Her mascara, I noticed, had smudged slightly under one eye, the left. She had come here without fixing it. That told me something. What do you want, Alara? She said. Her voice was very flat. The performance was gone. This was the voice she kept underneath the warmth. I had heard it once before in my other life, in a lawyer's office, the moment she thought she had won. Now it sounded different. Smaller. I want the estate to proceed correctly, I said. I want the original will honored. I want the fraud on the addendum documented and referred properly. That's all. That's all, she repeated. As if the words were a foreign language. That's all, I confirmed. She was quiet for a long time. A door opened somewhere above us. Footsteps on the stairs, then receding. The building creaked. Winter in the walls. I was always better at it than you, she said. At managing things. At knowing how to make things work. Yes, I said. You were. She looked at me. She was searching for something: anger, hurt, the satisfaction of having wounded me. I gave her none of those things. I looked back at her the way you look at weather. It happens. It passes. Why didn't you just take the settlement, she said. You would have had enough. I didn't want enough, I said. I wanted what was fair. She laughed. It was short and not quite right. Fairness, she said, as if the word were very small. Go home, Cassandra, I said. Your attorney is going to need you reachable tomorrow. I held the lobby door open. She walked through it. She did not look back. I went upstairs. I washed my hands. I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the files. There was one step left. The 30 days passed. The estate lawyer called a meeting. Cassandra arrived first. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse. Her hair was perfectly arranged. The rosewater scent hit me as I sat down and under it. The sandalwood. That warm, threatening undertone. I set my folder on the table. It contained Dr. Park's preliminary analysis, copies of the authenticated original will, and a summary of the soil contamination report. I did not open it yet. Cassandra's lawyer opened the meeting. He was a large, confident man. He spoke at length about the clarity of the addendum and his client's respect for the deceased's final wishes. I let him finish. Then I said, I'd like to table the addendum question for a moment. Everyone looked at me. I placed the soil contamination report on the table. I described, briefly and without visible emotion, what it contained. The hexavalent chromium. The remediation estimate. The private lab report that had been kept from the family for nearly 30 years. Cassandra's lawyer stopped moving his pen. I also want to note, I said, that the eastern parcel appears to have been the subject of informal financial arrangements involving third parties. I placed the copy of the Torrio letter on the table, dating back to 1997. The silence was interesting. It had a texture. Something between surprise and the sound of something large and structural beginning to shift. Cassandra said nothing. Her hands were folded on the table. I watched one thumb press, very hard, against the knuckle of the other. I'm not accusing anyone of anything today, I said. I'm simply noting that the estate is more complex than the addendum alone addresses. I believe a full review is warranted. I looked at the estate lawyer, not at Cassandra. A proper review. We adjourned. On her way out, Cassandra touched my arm. Her grip was light. Her voice was level. But her eyes were doing something they did not normally do. They were afraid. Alara, she said. Can we talk? Of course, I said. Let's schedule something next week. I did not look back as I walked to my car. The October wind was sharp. The smell of exhaust and dry leaves. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment. I allowed myself exactly one deep breath of satisfaction. Then I picked up my phone and called Holt. It's time to start the next phase, I said. I'm ready, he said. I've been ready for 2 weeks. Holt had been building a file on Cassandra's financial activities for the past month. He was very good at his job. He had the focused, deliberate energy of someone who understood that patience was a form of violence. His office smelled like freshly sharpened pencils and cold air from an overworked AC unit. He kept his files in color-coded binders. What he had found was not surprising to me. But it was the kind of documentation that would be devastating to anyone seeing it for the first time. Cassandra had been drawing funds from grandfather's estate for 14 months. Not large amounts, she was too careful for that. Small transfers. Consulting fees. Reimbursements for expenses that were partially real and partially invented. Taken individually, each transaction was defensible. Taken together, they were a pattern. She had also, Holt had discovered, established a holding company 18 months earlier. It had one asset. An option to purchase the eastern parcel of grandfather's property at a price significantly below the most recent independent valuation. She had arranged to buy it from herself. She just needed the estate to be settled in her favor first. There was one thing she did not know about that option. The valuation she used was based on the land's listed value, not its actual value. Once contamination liability was factored in, the number went deeply negative. She had set a trap. And she had stepped into it herself. I let her run with it a little longer. I needed her comfortable. I needed her to feel like she was winning. 6 weeks after the estate meeting, Cassandra made her move. She called me on a Sunday evening. Cheerful, warm, the voice of a cousin who loved me. She proposed a settlement. She would take full ownership of the land assets. I would take the liquid assets and personal property. Fair, she said. Clean. It would avoid a messy legal fight. The land is complicated, she said. You know I've always been better at managing property. That's generous of you, I said. She laughed. I just want what's best for both of us. I told her I'd think about it. I gave her a warm goodbye. I hung up. Then I called Mr. Renard and told him to file the fraud challenge on the addendum the following morning. Dr. Park's full report. Authenticated comparisons. Time-stamped archive records. Every piece of evidence, deployed at once. I also called the Environmental Compliance Division. I sent them the 1,994 soil report and the private lab analysis. I asked them to open a review of the eastern parcel. And I forwarded Holt's documentation to a journalist. She covered financial crimes for a regional paper. She had a reputation for thoroughness. No patience for people who wasted her time. The first domino. Push it gently. Let the rest fall on their own. Cassandra's lawyer received the fraud filing on Monday. I know because Cassandra called me within the hour. Her voice had changed. Still controlled, but thinner. Something underneath it now, a wire pulled tight. This is a mistake, she said. Possibly, I said. But I'd rather be certain. Alara. She said my name the way you say the name of someone you are starting to reassess. I thought we were family. We are family, I said. That's why I'm being thorough. A pause. A long one. I heard her breathing. The land has problems, she said. I didn't want to burden you with the details. What kind of problems? I asked. I made my voice curious, almost naive. Regulatory issues. Contamination. It's a liability, really. That's why I suggested the split. I was trying to protect you. She was lying. She was also, I realized, beginning to panic. The contamination story was her contingency, the explanation she had prepared in case the environmental issue surfaced. She had planned to seem generous by warning me. She had planned to seem like she was sacrificing herself. She had not planned to have the filing and the environmental referral arrive simultaneously. That's very thoughtful, I said. But I think it's best if the full picture comes out through the legal process. Don't you? Another pause. Longer this time. Of course, she said. Her voice was flat now. The warmth had gone out of it like heat from a stone after dark. Of course, Alara. She hung up first. 3 days later, the Environmental Compliance Office made a formal site assessment request. It would take 6 months. In the meantime, the eastern parcel was flagged no sale, no transfer, no development. Cassandra's option contract and the holding company built around it were effectively frozen. 1 week after that, the journalist published her first piece. It was careful and factual. No accusations, only documented irregularities in estate management. Everything cited from public records requests. Clean and devastating. Holt had made sure those requests were filed at the right moment. The piece did not name Cassandra as a wrongdoer. It did not need to. The irregularities were specific enough that anyone who knew the family would understand. I read the article sitting at my kitchen table. My apartment was small. The morning light came through the one eastern window at a low angle. The color of weak tea. My coffee was growing cold. Outside, the street sweeper was making its slow, grinding pass. Everything smelled like toast and autumn air. I felt, for the first time, something loosening in my chest. Not victory. Not yet. But the specific sensation of a knot that has been pulled in the right direction. There was still work to do. Cassandra called 3 times in the next 2 days. I let them go to voicemail. Her messages began businesslike, became conciliatory, and ended in the third one with a tight, controlled anger she almost but not quite managed to suppress. I want to talk, she said in the third message. In person. I think we've both made mistakes, and I'd like to move forward. Call me back, Alara. I did not call her back. I was busy. Mr. Renard had requested an emergency probate hearing. The grounds. Fraudulent alteration of testamentary documents. Dr. Park would testify. The authenticated will would be entered as the primary document. The timeline of the addendum's creation established through forensic ink analysis would be presented to the court. I also gave Holt permission to expand his investigation. He had found something new. Cassandra's holding company had received a wire transfer. It came from one of the principals of the development company, the one arrested in my first life. The connection predated grandfather's death by 8 months. She had been planning this for a long time. She had been planning it even while sitting at his kitchen table. Even while kissing his cheek. Even while her eyes went red at his funeral. I found I did not need to feel anything in particular about that. I simply needed to document it. The journalist called me the day before the hearing. I had not spoken to her directly until that point. Holt had handled the introductions. She had verified the documents independently. She was that kind of journalist, the kind who did not publish until she was certain. I respected that. "I'm running the piece tomorrow," she said. After the hearing. "What time?" I asked. 11 in the morning, she said. "Assuming the ruling goes as expected." "And if it doesn't?" I said. She paused. "Then I run it anyway. The documents stand regardless of the ruling." I appreciated that. She had no stake in my outcome, only in the accuracy of the record. "One thing," she said. "The holding company. The Eastern parcel. The environmental assessment. Were you aware of the contamination before the estate dispute began?" "Yes," I said. She was quiet for a moment. I could hear her pen on a notepad. The scratch of it, precise and deliberate. "And you let her pursue the land anyway," she said. It was not quite a question. "I let the process unfold," I said. "I didn't manufacture anything. I documented what existed." "Fair," she said. Then, "One more thing. Off the record." "All right," I said. "Was this always the plan? From the beginning?" I thought about how to answer honestly. About an 8-year-old sitting up on a wool sofa. About the smell of old pipe tobacco and the sound of a dog barking twice and going quiet. "From before the beginning," I said. She absorbed that without asking for more. A good journalist knows when to stop. The probate hearing was scheduled for a Thursday. The morning of. I drove to the courthouse through a light rain. The smell of wet asphalt. The scratch of my windshield wipers. I wore gray. I carried the folder Mr. Renard had prepared. And my own. Separate file. The one I had built since the storage unit. Since the brown office with the cold radiator. Since the night I woke up with a child's hands and an old woman's knowledge. Cassandra arrived 15 minutes before the hearing. She was wearing black again. The rose water was stronger today, the sandalwood underneath it almost gone, or maybe I was imagining that. Her lawyer walked one step behind her. She did not look at me until we were both seated. Then she looked. And the look was one I recognized. It was the look of someone who has understood something too late. I held her gaze for a second. Then I looked at Mr. Renard, who was arranging his papers. He did not rush. He had the practiced stillness of someone who had done this many times and knew that calm was the sharpest weapon in a courtroom. The judge entered. The hearing began. Dr. Park testified for 47 minutes. She was precise, thorough, and utterly unmoved by Cassandra's lawyer's cross-examination. The ink analysis was sound. The handwriting deviation was documented. The date alteration was verifiable through 3 independent methods. The judge asked several questions. He listened carefully to the answers. He was a man in his late 60s with the expression of someone who had seen every variety of human behavior and had stopped being surprised by any of it. When the testimony concluded, there was a brief recess. In the hallway, Cassandra found me. She put herself directly in my path. Her face was composed. Her voice was quiet and very careful. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Known what?" I said. Her jaw tightened slightly. "Don't do that." I looked at her. Outside, rain tapped against the courthouse windows. The overhead light was fluorescent and unforgiving. The rosewater smell, her smell, the one that had followed me through 2 lifetimes, was very close. My hands were warm. "I know everything, Cassandra," I said. "I have always known." She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had a different quality. Lower. Almost human. "What do you want?" "Nothing from you," I said. I want what was grandfather's. What was ours? What you decided should only be yours. I could have given you half, she said. Early on. If you'd just stayed out of it. You could have, I agreed. Why didn't you take the settlement? I thought about how to answer that. I looked at her hands, the diamond ring, the perfect manicure, the slight tremble at the knuckle that she was working very hard to control. Because the land was never worth taking, I said. You knew that. You just wanted me to take it and not find out until it was too late. Her expression shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. The chromium report, she said. Yes. How did you find? She stopped. Recalculated. The storage unit. Grandfather kept excellent records, I said. He just never organized them. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. She was not going to beg. That was not who she was. But something was happening in her face that I had never seen there before, a kind of collapse, slow and interior, like a building losing its support structure from the inside. The Torio letter, I said. The wire transfer to your holding company. The timing of the option contract. I have documentation on all of it. I paused. So does a journalist. And so do 2 regulatory agencies. The hallway was very quiet. The rain had stopped. Somewhere down the corridor. A door closed. You planned this, she said. It was not quite an accusation. It was more like recognition, the delayed arrival of an obvious fact. I've been planning it for a long time, I said. She stared at me, and for just a moment, I saw something in her expression that was not anger or calculation or even fear. It was something more like wonder. The specific, terrible wonder of realizing that the person you underestimated had, in fact, been watching you the entire time. Alara, she said. No, I said. Simply and without drama. We're done here. I walked back toward the courtroom. My heels were quiet on the tile. The air smelled of old carpet and institutional cleaning solution. I did not look back. Inside, I sat down next to Mr. Renard. He did not ask what had happened in the hallway. He simply nodded once and returned to his notes. The judge returned from recess and rendered his decision. The addendum was set aside as fraudulent. The original will was entered as the controlling document. The estate would be divided equally. A financial review of the estate management was ordered. The relevant documentation would be referred to the appropriate authorities. It took him 4 minutes to say what had taken me 2 lifetimes to earn. I did not cry. I wrote down the key points on a legal pad. My handwriting was very neat. The holding company was dissolved within the week. The option contract, frozen by the regulatory flag, expired unexercised. The eastern parcel remained subject to environmental review, a process that would take years and cost far more than the land was worth. Cassandra had neither the capital nor the legal standing to contest it. Holt delivered his final report to the Financial Crimes Unit. I was told the review would take approximately 8 months. I did not ask for updates. I did not need them. The journalist published 3 more pieces. The third one named Cassandra directly, citing the probate court ruling and the wire transfer documentation. Cassandra's professional association suspended her pending review. 2 of her major clients terminated their contracts within the month. I did not read those pieces for pleasure. I read them once, carefully, to verify the accuracy of the facts. Then I filed them and moved on. Winter came. I kept working. I kept my apartment tidy and my hours regular. I called no one about the case unless there was something actionable to discuss. I learned that revenge, executed cleanly, is not a feeling. It is a process. And like any process, it ends. It ended on a February morning. I was in my kitchen. Toast. Cold coffee. The eastern window light. The street outside was quiet a Sunday, early, before the neighborhood woke up. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Renard. Final probate documents filed. Estate transfer complete. Congratulations. I put the phone face down on the table. I ate my toast. The bread was slightly burnt at one corner. Outside, a pair of sparrows were arguing over something on the fence. One of them won. The other flew away and didn't come back. I poured out the cold coffee and made a new cup. The water from the kettle made its usual sound, that brief, specific hiss before it quieted. I stood by the window while it steeped. The light was different in February. Thinner. More honest. It showed everything at the right angle. Dust on the windowsill. A chip in the paint by the radiator. The old water stain on the ceiling I had never addressed. Not beautiful, but real. Mine. Cassandra had called twice since the hearing. I had not answered. She had not called again. I did not want to speak to her. I had nothing left to say to her that I had not already said through documents and lawyers and forensic testimony. And I had no desire to hear what she had to say to me, the justifications, the partial apologies, the reframing. I knew them already. I had catalogued them in my memory like everything else. The sparrows came back to the fence. Or maybe they were different sparrows. I could not tell. It did not matter. I thought about grandfather. About the oak tree and the wool sofa and the smell of old pipe tobacco soaked into the walls. About the way he had cursed at the eggs every single morning and never improved and never stopped trying. About the years I had sat with him as he declined, in both lives, because that was the right thing to do. Because care is not contingent on return. He had loved us both. He had trusted us both. He had left each of us exactly half of what he had, in a document witnessed by people he respected. And she had decided that was not enough. I understood her, in a way that I would never say out loud. I understood the hunger that tells you that what you have is insufficient. That what others have should be yours. I had felt something like it in my first life, smaller, quieter, but present. The difference between us was not that I had never wanted more than I deserved. The difference was that I had never decided the wanting justified the taking. That was the truth. The only one that mattered now. Outside, the February light shifted. A cloud moved, or the sun did. The light shifted. Warmer now. It touched the kitchen table and the cooling mug and the stack of files from all morning. I put my hand flat on the table. The wood was smooth and slightly warm. My fingers spread wide, all five, steady, ordinary. Not a child's hands. Not a dying woman's hands. Just mine. I had been given a second chance that I had not asked for and could not explain. I had used it as well as I knew how. I had not saved anyone. I had not reformed anyone. I had not forgiven anyone. I had simply made sure the truth came out. All of it. Documented and preserved. Delivered to the right people at the right time. That would have to be enough. And it was. I picked up my mug. I drank the coffee while it was still warm. The sparrows argued and settled and argued again. The light stayed. I was still here. And that, after everything, was the strangest, most solid victory of all. If you were in my place standing in that courtroom hallway, watching her face fall apart, would you have offered her the hand she never offered you? Would you have said the word that would have ended it differently? Tell me in the comments. And tell me, where are you watching from?